Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of School to Startup. I'm Ankita Bhosle from the University Partnership team at Tracxn. Tracxn has been supporting global startup ecosystem for over a decade as a leading platform for private market intelligence. We work closely with universities that encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. School to Startup is one of our key initiatives where we highlight academic leaders who are helping shape the future entrepreneurs. So today we are delighted to welcome Richard Leighton. He's an entrepreneur in residence at University of Liverpool Management School. So we're great to have you here, Richard.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So my first question to you is how, if you could share a little bit about your journey and what led you to academia and your experience so far.
Academia and universities in particular have been sort of very pivotal in the development of my entrepreneurial career. So I first ventured into entrepreneurship whilst I was at university, but I didn't necessarily recognise that I was being entrepreneurial. So I studied fashion at the University of Leeds, and I tried to get some work experience, and unfortunately I couldn't. I'm from Birmingham originally, and I couldn't afford to go and study down in London or intern down there for free. So what I decided to do was to start to actually create my own work experience whilst I was at universities. And I initially tried approaching a few commercial companies, but that didn't necessarily work out. And I thought, well, charitable social organisations are always looking for volunteers. And whilst I studied my sort of undergrad and also my master's, I ran fashion-based projects with organisations like Oxfam, Big Issue, Salvation Army, and the Homeless World Cup. When I graduated, I then looked for a position in industry, and like a lot of young graduates, especially in the fashion sector, I believe there's only about 750 new roles within that industry every year, but there's 3,000 graduates. I kind of struggled to gain a position because it's very competitive. But what I decided to do was to continue to be socially entrepreneurial, which I didn't realise I was being socially entrepreneurial at the time, or even that I was an entrepreneur. I set up some pop-up shops selling local young fashion designers because I recognised how difficult it was to set up and launch a label, and to provide fashion graduates or fashion students with the opportunity to come and get work experience within these pop-up shops, selling designs, working with designers, and to get the experience that they required to then gain employment in the industry, which is one of the reasons why I was struggling. And actually my first graduate level position that I gained, and I mainly did that project in particular because I was very conscious that I'd graduated from university for a while. I didn't want to get shortlisted for interview and then somebody say to me like, oh, what have you been up to for the last 6 months, and me not necessarily have something to talk about. And whenever I did gain an interview, if I wasn't successful, then I'd get feedback and think, well, what other skills, experience and expertise do I need to get to be more successful the next time around? But actually what happened is a large social investment group came across me and were kind of like, wow, oh my gosh, you've managed to do all of this with £500. Why don't you come and be a social entrepreneur in residence for us? And actually them offering me that position, I became the first male in Britain to be employed as a social entrepreneur by an organisation, which is and was really exciting. And so like for me, I can see both sides of entrepreneurship. Like I initially used entrepreneurship just to get work experience so I could hopefully go into sector, but actually by being entrepreneurial whilst I was at university and as a recent graduate, it actually created me my sort of first position in industry.
That's truly inspiring. It's great to see how your journey has come in full circle and is now shaping future innovators. My next question to you is, could you share some interesting projects or research initiatives that you're currently working on? And we would also like to know what is the kind of impact do you hope to bring with these initiatives?
Yeah, so this is my third role as an entrepreneur in residence. So I've had two roles as a social entrepreneur in residence, and this is my first role as an entrepreneur in residence as opposed to social entrepreneur in residence. But I mean, they're both sort of very similar. So I work in something called the Brett Centre for Entrepreneurship, which is part of the University of Liverpool Management School. And we have three pillars within the centre itself. We have entrepreneurship research, and we have sort of a professor that leads that, and then we have sort of other researchers within the centre as well that kind of look into various different subject areas in entrepreneurship to research into that and sort of to disseminate that information to entrepreneurs, local, combined authority, government, other people within the industry. And we have an enterprise education pillar where one of my colleagues that leads on that has developed undergraduate and postgraduate modules in entrepreneurship that run across multiple faculties and schools, bringing students together to collaborate, to learn about entrepreneurship and apply that collectively. And then I look after the third pillar, which is impact, which is basically our engagement with anyone and everyone outside of the university ecosystem. So one of the first initiatives that I initially set up just to kind of bring people in and together was running the university's entrepreneurs monthly meetup, and I run that across multiple universities and colleges in Liverpool, bringing lots of different students and graduates from different academic backgrounds and disciplines together. And also local entrepreneurs come and people that work in the entrepreneurship ecosystem within the LCR to support startups or SMEs. In addition to that, I run something really exciting. So it's called the Enterprise Education in Secondary Schools programme. So I guess it's a bit of a widening participation initiative. So I go into some local schools in Liverpool and deliver a range of activities right from across years 7 to 13. So that's from kind of the ages of 11 to 18. So and I have different activities in each year. And the idea is the pupils study from 11 to 18, a little bit of entrepreneurship each year. So it helps them become more entrepreneurial, which like for me, it helped me become more employability or more employable and help my employability skills. But then also those that maybe are less academic, which is what I was like when I was at school and aren't necessarily looking for a career path going sort of into university and above that, but actually think that they could become an entrepreneur themselves. It gives them some support and some confidence, some recognition to go on and do that. So yeah, those are a couple of initiatives that I run independently: the Entrepreneurs Monthly Meetup and the Enterprise Education in Secondary Schools programme. And then I also support a little bit on the research side, and then also I help sort of teach on the enterprise education side in the centre on undergraduate and postgraduate modules.
That's a lot going on, to be honest, and also very fascinating, and also to know that you're trying to work with every group of entrepreneurs, so whether it's SMEs, whether it's early stage companies, to even student entrepreneurs as young as probably 13-year-old. So that's a really interesting initiative to start with. So my next question is kind of aligned with this, is what is your perspective and from the experience that you've had so far, what are the kind of trends you've seen in the startup ecosystem that students should be watching closely, and how do you think academia is evolving to build an entrepreneurial mindset among students?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the reasons why I did develop the Enterprise Education in Secondary Schools program was because I kind of believed that people need to get into entrepreneurship earlier. Like quite often, like with myself personally, I had entrepreneurial ideas when I was at sixth form, so sort of college before university, but I didn't necessarily sort of implemented those. I waited until I was at university, which is great because you have a lot of time to develop your own community projects or initiatives to get experience or even start something up. So for me, kind of trend wise, I think it's the earlier you can start, the better, because quite often, you know, whether it's entrepreneurship or something else, you're going to fail because of a lack of experience. So the sooner that you start doing whatever it is that you want to get good at, the better, really. You know, if you can start when you're 11 or 12 and get your 10,000 hours in by the time you're at university, you're 21, 22, that will actually really help and support you, you know, with your academic studies because of the practical experience that you've got, or that you're able to apply the theory that you're learning. Or if you are to start something up whilst you're at university on your own, or maybe with someone else that you've met through a society or your course, or that you lived with in a hall of residence, then the likelihood of you being more successful it is obviously higher. And I think kind of now more than ever with AI coming in, we don't actually know what the landscape's going to be like in terms of employment. I mean, I've already got some graduates that I supported as long as, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, messaging me now on LinkedIn going, oh, I work for this company and there's 150 of us that are doing copywriting and we're all being made unemployed. Like, are there any positions going in Liverpool, or do you know anyone, or can, you know, what advice or guidance or support can you offer me? So I think kind of with the uncertainty and opportunity as well that AI brings, the sooner and the earlier we can get young people to think about entrepreneurship, to apply that a bit, to become resilient, the better, really. And those that are already at university, it's making them actually realize now that you don't necessarily need a really huge and big team to, you know, launch quite a powerful startup, because AI allows you to be more efficient, more effective. Those ideas that you used to have in your head, you know, especially if it's around technology, you used to have to engage with, you know, some coders, some web sort of developers, some user experience designers to design a website or an app or an application or some software and launch that. But there's AI platforms now that you can literally log on and go, oh, create me something a little bit like Facebook or eBay, but for, you know, this niche or this sector or this gap in the market that I've spotted. And it's no longer actually about, you know, your ability to, you know, develop a product or a service, because AI can help everybody do that more efficiently, more effectively, easier and more cost efficiently as well. And it's actually going to become more about distribution. So I think one of the most important things, in addition to just being more entrepreneurial younger, really sort of getting into technology and things like AI to facilitate you to create products and services, it's also actually about, or it's more so about distribution now. So it's like, it's not who can develop the product or the service the fastest, it's who can get the product or the service fastest out into the market. And if you're not backed by a lot of capital to kind of market and promote that, then you really need to have already built a community before you've launched your product or service that are interested in what you're doing. So I think sharing your entrepreneurial journey with others, you know, via social media, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, grown a bit of a following, talking to people about your experience, your journey, what you're developing, and growing that community that ultimately you can sell products or services to is going to be really important. And I think we've kind of seen that with the rise of social media, at least the last 5 years. A lot of the big entrepreneurs that are coming through, they're not necessarily entrepreneurs, they're creators that have, you know, gain people's attention via social media, and then they've kind of wanted to commercialize what in effect they've done because they just enjoy creating and they want to do that for a living, and they've done that very successfully, and suddenly they've like, I've got 3 million people that are following me, like, okay, now how can I be, I've been a creator, now how can I be an entrepreneur and sell to my audience? So I think it's really important now to not only learn entrepreneurship, but actually learn how to content create, take people along that journey with you, grow that following, that community that can then learn from you and your experiences, or, you know, buy your product or service. And yeah, so those are the 3 sort of areas really that I'm advising sort of people to get onto more, which is start as soon as possible, you know, really get up to AI and how that can be used to accelerate yourself, because if not, you're going to be left behind. And then thirdly, build a bit of a personal brand, online community following, that ultimately can learn from you, gain trust, and then obviously, you know, people buying products and services is a lot around trust. So once you gain that trust and develop that community, you can distribute whatever it is that you've decided to create to the market, you know, before anybody else. And you can also use that community to actually inform what product or service you actually design, you know, whereas traditionally you'd spot a gap in the market, come up with an idea, and then try and find the community to sell to, whereas it's kind of flipping that approach on its head. And there are a lot of content creators out there who are now probably considered more entrepreneurs that are doing that. So it's, yeah, if other people are doing that and following that method, then yeah, it's worth approaching. And if you're not successful, at least you've kind of learned some really valuable skills that somebody else would employ you to help them to, in effect, do the same.
That's really encouraging, and actually, it's very interesting to see how the ecosystem is shifting, and it's also interesting to see how academia is creating that room for innovation, and having social media in place and AI in place. I think it's going to be very challenging and interesting at the same time.
Yeah.
Any success stories, any student success stories that you've come across? Would you like to share some ventures that you are currently working with?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously sort of loads of success stories. So I've worked in universities now for around about 10 years. I've worked for not only the University of Liverpool, I worked for another university in Birmingham as the head of student and graduate entrepreneurship there. And then I also worked for London College of Fashion as well. In terms of the work that I've been doing in Liverpool, I've been less so engaged on the student and graduate entrepreneurship side like I was in my other role within Birmingham, where I was directly supporting student and graduate startups, whereas I'm more on the academic side within the Brett Centre for Entrepreneurship. But that's nice because I've got kind of a good overview of how both sides operate and how they individually and collectively help and support students to be entrepreneurial and you know, start up as well. So a lot of my work that I've also done has been with international students, which I've really enjoyed. So I used to run something, it was initially called the Tier 1 Graduate Entrepreneur Visa Endorsement Scheme, and then eventually it got simplified to Startup Visa. So I think one of my proudest things that I've done at university is manage that program. And when I was at Birmingham, I endorsed around about 120 internationals to stay after they graduate, to set up and run some businesses. So in terms of kind of for me, the success that I've really enjoyed and like seeing is somebody coming from abroad, taking a real risk, being very entrepreneurial, coming here to study, and then they've remained to set up and run their own sort of businesses. So, I mean, an example is there's an international graduate called Rudy, who came from India to Liverpool, and he runs a business called Abjack. And in effect, what he's done over a period of time, through trialing and testing and pivoting, is develop a micro food hall. So in city centres or suburban sort of areas, high streets, quite often, you know, people go into takeaways for food, but it's kind of like, if you've got a family, they're like, well, where should we go for food tonight? And it's like, one wants some Indian food, one wants some Chinese food, another one maybe thinks, I want pizza, or, you know, I want some fried chicken. So it's kind of like families just have to go to one place, and it's kind of compromise. But what actually he's done, he's created this micro food hall where he has multiple brands, all in one space that share a kitchen. But people can either online through apps order or go in, and, you know, somebody could have Greek food if they wanted Greek food, and someone can actually have, you know, a smash burger, and someone can have an Indian. And so he's been kind of really successful in terms of what he's developed, and he's created a successful model now that he's looking to replicate into other areas of the country. And what actually I really love about his model, or his platform, is it's actually helping other entrepreneurs, because, you know, if you've developed a really good takeaway in one locality and you want to start to scale and grow and develop that, unless you've got a huge amount of capital or, you know, extremely lucky, you know, it's fairly difficult to scale from one takeaway to suddenly, you know, having 6 different locations. So what he allows, you know, individuals to do is kind of come on the journey with him when he grows and develops and goes into new localities, to grow and develop their brand, and to sort of manage that on their behalf. So I think that's a really good success and a great idea, where they're not only serving the customer and the community that are kind of like, we want choice, we don't want to have to this, that, or the other, but equally within his business itself, he's helping and supporting other entrepreneurs. He even helps people that want to get their own food-based startups. So he does have brands within his mini food hall that are already established, but actually, if there's young entrepreneurs that want to dip their toe into the food industry, that, you know, can't afford the 60 or 70,000 pounds to take on a takeaway and invest, you know, this is an entry point into the market for them. So it's a normal takeaway size, but literally you can go in and there's 6 different brands within there. So I thought that's a really inventive and successful sort of student startup example that I sort of really admire, and have enjoyed watching develop, and with a lot of hard work from Rudy's side, I will say, at my time while I've been in the entrepreneur in residence within them.
That's incredible, and actually stories like these really show how powerful the right ecosystem and mentorship can be. My next question to you is, how do you see the role of academia changing in the startup and innovation space in the next few years?
Yeah, again, I think the way that AI is advancing and changing, I think, I mean, I'm starting to bring in some activities that I run that incorporate AI. So with the Entrepreneurs Monthly Meetup, which is an extracurricular activity, but I run a startup school every year for that community that go to that, and I did sort of an AI focused one. So I think in the future, like I said, it's universities supporting students to really learn that technology that is potentially putting roles at risk in industry, but equally, if individuals or existing organisations, whether they're commercial or social entities, if they're not utilising and adapting to to AI, then their competitors that are suddenly gonna, take off and take away from them, and they're not going to be able to sort of catch them. I mean, I think one of the challenging difficulties with universities traditionally is they don't work and operate at the speed of industry. So, a worry is that we're not necessarily teaching things like AI and technology as quickly as we could to students or graduates that we're supporting around entrepreneurship, to learn more about that and to use that to be entrepreneurial or to launch new products or services. That said, I mean, AI seems to actually be accelerating and developing so fast that I don't even think the AI sector can keep up with their own, let alone a university. But so for me, it's sort of around technology, and it's actually doing what we're doing, which is embedding enterprise education right from across the whole of the university. Because, like I said, I got into entrepreneurship, by accident, if you like, or by not realizing I was being entrepreneurial. I was actually using it as an employability tool to get experience, skills and expertise. So I think it's about making students aware now that whether you want to go and start up or not, you're going to have to be entrepreneurial in the future in terms of your employability, the labor market that you're going into, because things are going to change very rapidly because of that technology. So the sooner that you learn about that, adapt, start to use it for yourself, like I did when I was a graduate and I was just running my own project, you're going to create opportunities that weren't necessarily even there. And the opportunities that are, if you're kind of not being proactive, are going to be very difficult to gain. So I was talking to the individual that runs the local angel investment network in Liverpool, and she had about 175 applications for a really good role for a recent graduate to help market and promote and coordinate the activity that they're doing to try and get angel investments into startups in the Liverpool city region. But it just kind of shows you now that how competitive roles are. So if you're not doing something where someone spots you and thinks, I can make a role for you, or that when you apply for something, your CV is going to really stand out because you're extremely proactive, you can hit the ground running, you not only understand how to operate within a business environment, but you've actually got the ability to think outside the box that you'll fit in to actually develop, commercially, the entity that you're working for as well. Then you're going to potentially be lost in that sea of other people who are applying.
That's a powerful perspective, and clearly, we see that academia is becoming a true catalyst for innovation. My next question to you is, what is the kind of advice? I think the whole episode has been around this, but any particular advice you would like to give to any student or a young entrepreneur who's just starting off?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go for advice that I haven't necessarily given. So I was really proactive and just went out there and learned by failure. And entrepreneurship is, people just see the success, but it is quite brutal. It's kind of constant failure, and you basically alleviating those challenges, and what's left is something that resembles success that other people kind of just see with rose-tinted glasses. And it's quite difficult for you because, if you fail 99 times and then the one time everything's now working great, it's still difficult to kind of take that rejection or sort of that hard work to do. So I think as much as you can do to get experience from other entrepreneurs or other entrepreneurial individuals or other industry professionals, I only went into starting my own thing because I found it difficult to get the work experience. But I mean, you've got great things like LinkedIn now where you can reach out to, loads of different people in the industry to try and get an internship or a work placement or a year in industry, or even just to kind of volunteer to sort of help and support them. So don't be afraid to try and gain employment for someone to pay you to learn, so that you then don't make those mistakes in the future. If you definitely know that you want to be an entrepreneur, then go and try and find an entrepreneur that you really admire, who has maybe got some skills that if they could be transferred to you, whether they're in your sector and industry you want to go into, then go and kind of work under them. Ideally paid, but even if you if it's not, go and work from them. And if they're not necessarily a huge entrepreneur with a huge organization, that would be even better. Maybe they've got to 10 employees, so they've done better than 99% of entrepreneurs kind of ever will do. It's only a small percentage of companies in the UK that have 10 or more sort of employees, and then kind of learn from them how they've done that. If you work in that environment, you're going to have to be involved in everything, as opposed to if you went and worked for a really big successful entrepreneur who's got a company with 100 individuals, you're just going to be placed in one small area or element where you're not going to get full oversight of the entire business. But even if you're not fortunate enough to be able to approach a successful entrepreneur locally, or even to be able to do that virtually now, I mean, the internet and things like YouTube are phenomenal. You can go on there. There's podcasts where you can listen to entrepreneurs. There's even really super successful entrepreneurs like Stephen Bartlett, who does his Behind the Diary weekly vlog, where he's telling you how he's growing and developing his company, how he's recruiting, what technology he is using, what products and services he's developing for himself to be more efficient and effective as an organization, but to then actually sell that to his following, to his community, and that he's grown online. And I kind of say this under the guise that what's been fantastic about coming into university environments is I've just talked about my experience as a practitioner. I do have a master's as well. So, I'm able to operate at a fairly high level in terms of academically, not as high as someone who has a PhD, but I've sort of talked about kind of my journey, my startup process, what I do, and then people have put academic terms and theories behind that and stuff. And one of the things that I've kind of learned is in the UK, and it might be relevant to the rest of the world as well, but the most successful entrepreneurs, those who are more likely to set something up and it kind of go on to employ them and others, are actually in the brackets of between 40 and 50 years old. So quite often when we think about entrepreneurship, we just think about those young people at college or university, or just coming out, like have nothing, are taking a huge risk, and suddenly, 2 months, 2 years later, Facebook is buying Instagram and they've made £1 billion. Well, there's a very small percentage of people actually doing that. And those who are actually being successful at entrepreneurship are in between those 40 and 50 brackets, where they've got a decade or two's worth of experience, and they've maybe kind of grown complacent working for somebody else, and they want to change processes, systems and procedures, but they can't, and they've got the experience, connections, and appetite to then go and set something up themselves and be successful. So don't kind of look at getting a job with someone else for a while to build up some capital and to gain some skills as a bad thing. I just went into entrepreneurship straight away because I didn't have LinkedIn. There wasn't YouTube when I started. I think if I had what other younger people have got now, graduating from university, I would be doing it a different way. I did entrepreneurship out of necessity, not because I was really driven to to do that. But when you do go into employment or volunteering or try and get work experience, just be very strategic around why you're doing that. So it's like, I need to get better at social media marketing, so find someone with that, or I need to get better at branding and communication, or I need to get better at, you know, the manufacturing side or retail, and be very, very intentional about what positions you take and who you go and talk to basically get that experience that you need to ultimately either gain and develop a really great career, or to then have the confidence to go out and deliver your own product or service and create and start a successful business or social enterprise.
That's such valuable advice, and I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of young listeners we have. Finally, if our audience wants to follow your work and learn more about your research or any upcoming projects, where they can reach out to you.
Yeah, so that's a good one. So I am going to show you now that I practice what you preach. So, I mean, I recognize really that I should have done more at least 10 years ago in terms of maybe capturing my entrepreneurial journey, me posting things out on social media, growing a community and everything like that. I've been really successful at the universities that I've worked at, and the other socially entrepreneurial projects that I've set up outside of my roles within university. You know, so like I've ran the biggest entrepreneurs meetups in Birmingham and sort of in Liverpool, but I've been reluctant to kind of digitize that and put that online, but I have started doing that now. So I have my own little personal brand, if you like, that I set up, I think about 8 years ago. I just never used it because I was always just too busy implementing to actually have the time to tell and show people what I'm doing. But I'm kind of making a real concerted effort at the moment to do that. So if you wanted to follow me on, I think it's TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, it's The Social Entrepreneur, because my background social entrepreneurship. So it's normally The Social Entrepreneur sort of underscore. But if you search for Richard Anthony Leighton, you'll find me on you'll find me on sort of LinkedIn or or it'll pop, or my social media will pop up as well. So at the moment, and what I've done for the past 12 months is I've started to digitize a lot of the activities that I run in university. So I record the Entrepreneurs Monthly Meetups, like a live podcast. One of the activities in the Enterprise Education in Secondary Schools program is called the Kids Interview Entrepreneurs podcast. So it's a bit like Diary of a CEO, but I take entrepreneurs into schools and the school kids in the library with loads of books behind them and everything, record that. And then I'm now starting to release clips and the whole sort of episodes there. So I'm not only trying to obviously build a bit of a presence, a brand in the community that I could potentially help and support and potentially sell products and services or gain revenue from if I got enough followers from a share of advertisements or sponsorship and things like that. So I am sort of practicing what I preach, sort of saying to other people, look, you need to develop a personal brand, you need to grow a community, and then sort of listen to that community to kind of help them, and then potentially find ways to commercialize that so you can make a living from that and being entrepreneurial in the future. So yeah, The Social Entrepreneur _.
Sure. Perfect. We'll make sure those links are shared with our audience. And thank you so much for your time, Richard. And thank you so much for sharing your time here and the insights that you've given us. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. We hope this conversation inspires you to take the next step into your own journey. Stay tuned for more such episodes.